Hello, my friends. This is Clay Jenkinson. This is my introduction to this week's podcast. This is one of the most important programs that we've ever done. Everyone is freaked out. Even people who voted for President Trump are worried about where the country is headed. Everyone is anxious that they know this is going to be a nightmare series of years, that there's going to be terrible disruptions and colossal controversies and lawsuits and probably violence, and that's people across the spectrum. And of course, the people on the left are just totally reduced to rage and blubbering and threatening to leave the country and so on. And so I wanted to do a program kind of based on A Guide to the Perplexed, E. Schumacher's book, or Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, or Voltaire's Candide, or Reinhold Niebuhr's Serenity Prayer. But I wanted to do a program saying we can cope, and we can use this as opportunity, each of us, to improve our lives, to be better at what we are and do and say and represent. We should undertake a self-actualization program. There are mechanisms for us to make the most of this situation, and if everyone who is listening will do that, it will change the world. That the change is not going to come from the top down. The change is going to come from the bottom up. And to the extent that each one of us becomes an exemplum of a more enlightened way of looking at life, healthier, more vibrant, more fit, more productive, more civil, we will be infinitely better off. And so I worked really hard to get ready for this program because I'm so convinced that we need this, that there's no point in just wringing our hands or having a nervous collapse over this, that we have to have a plan, and each one of us has to have a plan to make the world around us, in whatever small way we can, a more enlightened world. And that's going to take civility, it's going to take patience, it's going to take discipline and hard work, it's going to take hard reading. And I offered my 4-point plan. You can go into mere escapism and just watch reruns of Gilligan's Island. You can have the enlightenment of one, just think, I'm going to just live my life and I'm going to turn away, but I'm going to continue to grow and enlighten myself, but I can't be responsible for anything outside of myself or my immediate surroundings. You can form the Republic of Letters, the voluntary community of like-minded, like-purposed people in the country, that made possible now by electronic media and the knitting together of our culture through social media. Or you can get into the arena, as Theodore Roosevelt would have you do, and get bloodied and fall off the horse and get back on it and keep fighting the good fight. And so I think most of us cascade through the first 3 of those and then wonder about what it would be like to be in the arena. But at any rate, I'm trying in this program to provide comfort to my friends who are so deeply worried, and of course to myself too. And I also realize that I'm so highly imperfect and that there's still time to get better. So I have a personal plan, but I think it's New Year's resolution time. This is our New Year's program. Instead of just talking about Jefferson's 2 public receptions at the White House per year, I wanted this to be more meaningful and for people to, I hope, be inspired by what I'm saying and David Horton is saying here about ways in which we can cope and ways in which we can grow. So please listen, and if you like this, share it with your friends. But if you think that these are useful suggestions about the next 4 or 8 years and how we survive them and how we get through them with dignity and civility and personal progress, if not social progress, then please share it out. And if you like what I'm doing, trying to stay in the equation, trying to be a centrist, trying to respect views that I don't understand and don't hold, then I hope you'll support this program too. I have mighty things that I want to accomplish, and there's new life in what I'm doing, and I'm trying to be the change, which is not easy, but I am not going to sit on the sidelines and whine or shout or shake my fist. I'm just not going to do that, because I know there's nothing really to be gained from that. So let's go to the show.
Good day and welcome to Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. I'm David Horton. I have the honor of serving as your guest co-host today from Radford University in Radford, Virginia. And joining me is the fabulous humanities scholar, Clay Jenkinson. Good morning, Mr. Jenkinson. How are you?
Good morning, David Horton. I haven't been to Radford now for a while. I love coming there. And the last time I was there, you had a big new university inn that was going up. I can't wait to stay in it.
Absolutely. We can't wait to have you back sometime in the new year. And it's always fascinating this time of year to talk about what Mr. Jefferson's thoughts were on the new year and the change from one time to another.
So we've done, I suppose, 5 or 6 or 10 New Year's programs over the years. And usually I am Mr. Jefferson. And Jefferson opened the White House during his 8 years as president twice per year. Once on the 4th of July, for obvious reasons. That was his big day. I mean, he wrote the most important document in American history, perhaps the most important document in the history of human aspiration, and also January 1st. And the reason he liked to have a reception on January 1st was he was incredibly orderly, as you know. He had an obsession with order. And New Year's is a purely secular holiday. There's no religious connotation of any sort. It's mathematical. 1 year ends, 365 days are gone. A new year begins, 365 days are about to come. It dates back to the old Romans, and they named that month January after the god Janus. And Janus is a god that looks before and after, and I've seen statues of it in Rome at the Capitoline Museum. They're a little bit grotesque because you have a two-faced statue, one looking right and one looking left, but the idea is that on January 1st, you look back to the old year and you look forward to the new. Jefferson thought this was perfect, David, because he was a deist and a skeptic, and he did not like to breach the wall of separation between church and state. This was a really good time for him to have one of his 2 annual receptions at the White House. And so I love that about it. I love New Year's for this very reason. And, there are no gift exchanges on New Year's. I do think there's something a little bit odd about getting drunk and having a hangover on the first day of the new year. But that hasn't been my habit for a very, very long time.
Mine either.
I seldom reach midnight. If my daughter's here, she makes me, and then we have a little champagne. But if she's not here, 9:30 or 10, I take a book to bed. And I'm asleep when the new year comes. So that's Jefferson, and it's interesting to me. I really think this is what I love about Thomas Jefferson, David. He thinks things through. He doesn't want to have an Easter reception. That would violate his principles of separation of church and state. What holiday you're going to choose? Thanksgiving didn't exist in the way we think of it at that time. So he thinks, well, I should do this before the next session of Congress. And if I do it now, nobody can accuse me of having an agenda. This is a purely mathematical point in the calendar. It's perfect for Jefferson.
Well, the new year is filled with lots of different thoughts, both excitement and anticipation of what's to come. Looking back at the previous year and what have we accomplished and what have we not made happen. But I think this year is particularly interesting as we go into the new year. There are some folks who are really excited for what may happen in 2025, and some folks who feel like this may be the beginning of an ominous time and a challenging time for many Americans and many people around the world. If we could, for just a few minutes, maybe take a little time to talk about not only this time period, but other challenging time periods. And in staying with the theme of Mr. Jefferson, looking back several hundred years to 1800 and the contested election and the Federalist reaction and how it was a very tense time and a time when people were not uniformly happy one way or another. Can we look at that just a little bit?
Yes, I've made a list of some of the other moments in our history when things have been this volatile. But before I do that, just let me say this, that I don't want this program to be about Donald Trump and the MAGA and the election of 2024. We're all aware of that. And I will tell you, most of the people I know, and I know people across the spectrum, are still deeply concerned about what's coming. Even the Trump supporters wonder how this populist revolution is going to play out. And the people on the left, I have to say, if I may use a technical term, I have a number of friends who've simply freaked out. I mean, they've talked about leaving the country. They've talked about the end of America. They're nervous wrecks. I mean, literally, they write me and say, I can't sleep. And I think this is pretty widespread. There's a fundamental concern that we're teetering. Everyone said before the election, both on the left and on the right, that this was the most important election in American history. Maybe yes, maybe no, but it's certainly the most important of my lifetime. And we know that Donald Trump won. I want to say to everyone, elections matter. I'll say it again, elections matter. He won fair and square. There are no allegations of cheating. He won in the Electoral College. He won in the popular vote. It was decisive. It wasn't, I think, a landslide, but it was a decisive victory. And they spent about $5 billion on this thing. Nobody can say that they didn't know what was at stake. And here's something that I will praise Donald Trump for. He told us what he's going to do. There's no mystery about what he intends to do. There's going to be up to a 20% tariff, particularly directed towards China. He's going to try to dismantle the deep state, as he calls it. We would call it, I suppose, the Washington bureaucracy or the permanent employee rosters of Washington. He's going to remove talk of global climate change from our key environmental agencies. He's planning to get rid of some of our departments altogether, beginning with the Department of Education. He says he's going to round up to 20 million people who do not have proper credentials as immigrants to this country and put them in camps and deport them to the countries of origin. He has not been silent about any of these things. He's told us what he plans to do. Everyone knows this, and he won. He's entitled, therefore, to try to enact or bring about the results that he won the election for. And so that my friends who are freaked out, I keep having to say to them, he told us what he's going to do. He won the election. That's how democracy works. There's no allegation of cheating. She conceded. He will be inaugurated on the 20th of January. We'll see what he can accomplish. And so I just want everyone to realize that this is the process. Now, if she had won, if Kamala Harris had won, I feel very certain we'd be right back to 2021 with madness and allegations of rigging and lawsuits and stirring up popular discontent and maybe stirring up riots. Who knows? We don't know, but I think no reasonable person could believe that he would not have made the biggest possible national crisis out of losing if he had lost. So we are where we are. Since the election, my friend, I have not once watched MSNBC, Fox, or CNN. And I mean not once. I have turned away emphatically from those major echo chamber cable networks. I'm not going to give the next 4 years to being addicted to this thing. However you see it, Donald Trump's going to make us live his world for the next 4 years. And we know what a disruptor he is. We know that he's capable of the most vicious attacks on his enemies rhetorically and so on. And that the left takes the bait every single time. I just am not going to let myself do that. And so I want this program today. I'm going back to Boethius, of the 5th and 6th centuries AD. He was in prison. He was on death row, and he wrote The Consolation of Philosophy. What I want this program to be is a guide for people who are really worried about ways that we can get through this, engage in self-improvement, find a focus for our best energies, and spread enlightenment one person at a time, one ripple in the pool at a time. I think that's the best service we can do to the American people. And even though, my friend, we're recording this in mid-December for the New Year's, I've already made resolutions. We'll come back to those. And I'm hoping by then they will have solidified. Per New Year's resolutions, Dave, I've been doing some research. It's not pretty. 88% of all New Year's resolutions are dropped within a couple of weeks. And of course, this is a boon to the gym membership industry because everyone signs up. They're going to get fit this year, really. I'm going to get tight. I'm going to have great abs. I'm going to be, when the swimsuit time comes, I'm going to be a god or goddess. And then they don't go back. And so the gyms don't have to provide towels or hot water. They just take that check until people finally, in anger around Easter or June 1st, stop making those payments. So I know that we're not good at this. I know we're not good at resolutions, but I intend to try to keep these, and I hope people will keep their own, because I don't believe we can get through this unless everyone listening attempts to be their best self or a better self and to spread whatever enlightened ideas they have as generously and gently as possible for the next 4 years.
I think you're 100% right. And I'll add this thought to what you're saying. This is a time where at the national level, some folks are going to agree 100% with everything you just listed as Donald Trump's agenda, and other folks are horrified at every single word you said. So it is a divided time, and we'll see what actually happens. And it may be a time where the federal government doesn't do what the federal government has done for hundreds of years, or at least the last century. But I think that there's also an opportunity for folks to turn to local and state government and look at things that they can do in their lives to affect their neighbors and friends in a positive way, to find protections if there are things they're worried about losing protections from at the federal level. And since the Dobbs court decision, we've seen a lot of states and a lot of regions doing exactly that, taking the opportunity to protect rights as they see fit and to make decisions as they go. Sometimes that's the light in the darkness, and sometimes that's the positive sign you can take away from things. I think the other thought as we go into this program is whatever happens over the next 2 years and then the 2 years following that may set the stage for a totally different version of America one way or another. And we can certainly look at that and talk it through with some of the other things that have happened. It's a pendulum in a lot of ways. It has to swing one way before it can swing the other. And it's really an interesting time as we look at all that has happened rhetoric wise, all that has happened electorally, things that I think many Americans never thought would happen have come to fruition. Well, I'd like to hear this whole list of things that you've put together, but first we need to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit about that and then lead into some ways that we're going to cope with whatever comes in the new year. This is Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. Welcome back to Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. I'm David Horton. I have the honor of serving as your guest host today. And right before the break, we were getting ready to talk a little bit about how, even though this is a strange time that we're not sure exactly what's going to happen in the new year, it's not unprecedented. Clay, could you go through that list of things that you've kind of put together of the last couple hundred years of where it's not such an unprecedented time?
Yeah, thank you, David. I'll do this quickly, and of course, one could add to this list. But these are a number of the inflection moments in American history that I think were equally troublesome, and some dramatically, almost infinitely more. So let me begin. I traveled the country this year, 41 states, 21,000 miles, and I can tell you this: the country is thriving. We are a bustling, enterprising nation. We have actually a superb infrastructure. The economy is booming. Now, there are problems of economic inequality, and many people have 2 or 3 jobs, and there are many, many issues. But nobody can say that this is a national economy in collapse. And when I traveled the country, I cheered up because what's going on in Washington and what's about to happen for the next 4 years or more is one part of America, but it's not America, David. America is many, 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 many things that have little or nothing to do with the national political crisis that we're in. Most people don't pay a lot of attention to that. They go about their lives. They put food on the table for their children. They struggle a little economically now. Inflation. I was just buying groceries a couple of days ago and was shocked by their cost. I get it. I think that's why, frankly, he won the election. I don't think it has much to do with his agenda. I think it has a great deal to do with the perception that it's hard to make ends meet. And there is also, I think, just a massive concern about immigration, and that the Democrats really failed to understand how concerned the American people are with that, and with law and order, and with inflation, and with political correctness, and so on. So I just want to say that I don't think that we should fixate ourselves on the national arena as seen through cable television, because the country is 85% not that, in my opinion. And I really loved seeing this country in 2024. I know whereof I speak. So I know we only have a few minutes before our first break, but let me just go through a few of these previous moments. People say, oh, this has never happened with unprecedented ground. Well, yes and no. Election of 1800. Jefferson and Aaron Burr tie, goes into the House of Representatives, takes 36 ballots. There's talk of civil war. Governor Monroe amasses a plan to put troops on the border to take back the government for Jefferson if necessary. The Federalists have similar plans. It doesn't come to that. Eventually it resolves itself. But I remember reading some of the rhetoric in the Federalist newspapers that were predicting that Jefferson would confiscate everyone's Bible. The churches would be destroyed. One of them said, dwellings in flames, like the French Revolution, female chastity violated. I mean, this kind of nightmare scenario. And none of that happened, of course. When Jefferson was inaugurated, one newspaper had like black mourning type, and it said, today expired the American Republic. Well, it didn't. He bought Louisiana. He sent Lewis and Clark out. Things worked splendidly. He began the era of good feelings. He was one of the most successful presidents in American history. So I think wait and see on that. That was 1800. The Civil War, of course. I made this list yesterday. Lincoln is elected in November. South Carolina secedes on December 20th. Mississippi, January 9th. Florida, January 10th. Alabama, January 11th. Georgia, January 19th. Louisiana, January 26th. Texas, February 1st. Virginia, your Virginia, April 17th. Arkansas, May 6th. North Carolina, May 20th. And Tennessee, June 8th. Imagine if after Donald Trump was elected a month ago, California and Massachusetts and New York seceded from the Union. And this led to a civil war. And the cost of that was unbelievable amounts of American treasure, and almost 800,000 people died in battle in a civil war. So nothing like that is going to happen. We know that whatever is wrong here, David, that's not going to happen. The Red Scare, 1917 to 20, during World War I, people jailed for things today that we just regard as free speech. It was a reign of terror. It gave us the Sedition Act, which is still on the books and is invoked from time to time. Then the Great Depression, 1929 to 1940. In 1933, 24.9% unemployment. Here in my native North Dakota, at one time, there were 175,000 people on direct federal assistance, not indirect, but direct checks from the government to stay alive. The New Deal saved North Dakota. And yet, during that period, more than 1 million Americans migrated to the West Coast, hoping to find a better life, as depicted in Steinbeck's The Grapes of Wrath. The McCarthy era, appalling moment in American history. The Hollywood 10, writers' lives were destroyed. Actors' lives were destroyed. Innocent people in our national bureaucracy were accused of being communists by Joseph McCarthy. The House Un-American Activities Committee, what other country has a commission like this? The Un-British Committee, the Un-Swedish Committee, the Un-German Committee. It doesn't happen. This was a cataclysmic time. Arthur Miller, of all people, the man who wrote The Crucible, about this, by the way, was one of those who was persecuted. And John Steinbeck wrote a letter defending him, and it was the only letter by a major person defending Arthur Miller. Everyone was terrified, and everyone went quiet. Then 1968 and 1969, I lived through that. The country was coming apart. 1968, the assassinations of Martin Luther King and Robert Kennedy, the disastrous Democratic National Convention in Chicago, the Tet Offensive, the realization that the war in Vietnam could not be won, riots in the streets, race riots in the streets, anti-war riots in the streets. There was actually a Trivial Pursuit card when my daughter was a child that said, how many cities did not burn down in 1968, 1969? The answer was 0, that there were conflagrations in every major city, largely over race. And then, of course, finally, September 11th, 2001. And you remember how we freaked out over this and passed the Patriot Act and went to war against Iraq, even though 18 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi, etc., etc. So if anyone says this is unprecedented, I would ask you this: who's been jailed? Who's been assassinated? Whose house has been raided in the middle of the night and their papers confiscated? What newspaper or what media outlet has been shut down? Now, some of that may come. I don't think so. But compared to this list of American moments, we can't say that this is unprecedented and more severe than others.
So that's a lot to think about, and, certainly challenging times, some of which we individually remember and some of which history books were written about. And so we've learned about over the years. But now that we've talked about some of the challenges that we faced as a nation, as a planet historically, I know you've been giving a lot of thought to this. Have you developed your own plan for how we cope with what may be getting ready to happen in our nation?
I have, and I hope that it's useful to people. I also, and I'm eager to hear your own views of all of this, the things you think that we can do. But let me start by talking about an article that I wrote for Governing magazine about 3 years ago. And it really covers this very ground because it was sort of how are we going to cope with what's happening in this national political paralysis and the deep partisan browbeating and some mutual distrust and so on. And I offered 4 possibilities for each person. And I wonder where you will lie in this one, my friend. Number 1, just turn away, escape. Binge watch NCIS, binge watch Yellowstone, watch old reruns of Gulliver's Travels, read the complete works of Dickens, whatever it is. But just turn away and say, I can't face it. I'm just going to escape. And escapism is a good American habit. And let me say, we have a culture that can really provide that. I mean, if you want to watch the Real Housewives series, you could spend the next 5 years doing nothing but watching Atlanta, Salt Lake City, Southern California, Anaheim, etc. So there are better and worse forms of escape, no question. But we could escape. That's number 1. Number 2, the enlightenment of one. You keep reading good books. You try to lead an intentional life. You are civil. Discard some bad habits. You take on some new projects, but you decide all I can do is be the best possible person that I can be and continue the process of self-actualization. The enlightenment of one. I can't fix it, so I'm not even going to try, but I'm not just going to sit around. I'm going to continue to move forward, to grow, to progress, to enlighten myself within my own family or my own household. That's number 2. Number 1, escape. Number 2, the enlightenment of one. Number 3, a voluntary community. That's a term out of Tocqueville, but this is made possible in part by the internet. So you know people across the country who share your values, who read the same books that you do, who watch the same movies or television, who have the same political outlook. And we find each other either in our actual towns, you in Radford, I in Bismarck, North Dakota, or our virtual community that we form. And I will tell you this, my virtual community is much more valuable to me than my local one. I like my local one a lot. I have dear friends here. But across the country, I have hundreds of like-minded people, scores of whom are my friends, and I would never have known them without the internet, without the digitization of culture. So this has that kind of benefit for me. But let's just say that you are a gay woman in Salt Lake City and you feel alone and persecuted or judged. Maybe you find a gay person in Houston, a gay person in Tampa, a gay person in Burlington, Vermont, and you form a virtual community, and you can help each other, you can process your concerns, you can guide each other through some of the shoals of all of this. So that's the third, a voluntary community. And then finally, Theodore Roosevelt, get into the arena and fight the good fight. His famous quotation, it's not the critic who counts, the credit belongs to the man who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes up short again and again, for there is no effort without error and shortcoming, who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows the great devotions, the great enthusiasms, and spends himself wholly in a worthy cause. And if he should succeed, knows the triumph of high achievement, but if he should fail, fails while daring greatly, and is not to be numbered among those pale and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. One of the greatest things ever said, maybe Roosevelt's greatest thing. I've seen it innumerable times on the walls of CEOs and professors and business people and so on. So get into the arena. So again, we can escape, and maybe we do all of these in different moments. We can have the enlightenment of one. We can form a voluntary community and just say, that America is not my America, but my America is people that I share values with. Or we can get into the arena and duke it out. And I think that covers a lot of ground, and I'm going to post that on the Listening to America website. But I ask everyone to try to figure out where you want to be in this. And I've talked to lots of people, David, in the last year or two, who say, I'm not getting into the arena. It's too bloody. It's too awful. I can't do it. I can't go. I'm not getting into the arena. I'm going to leave that to people who are willing to do it. So then that gives you 3, escape, the enlightenment of one, or forming a voluntary community. And I suppose we mix and match. But where are you in this?
Well, I think it's all of the above. I think you're 100% correct with all of those. There are some times where we need to just remove ourselves from the conversation, take a break, and maybe find a new path. Getting back into the arena is important, but I would say this is probably the overarching piece. And the advice I would give to folks: step back from eternal outrage. I think one of the challenges of an election year, an election period, is that we feel hyper outraged about everything. And it really doesn't matter where you are on the political spectrum. You can find something that really doesn't sit well with you and can dominate your thoughts and can put you in that state of mind. Now, there may be very good reason for that, and there may be things happening that you need to make a change, that you need to help evolve and move forward. But I would say that we do this so often and we're so overhyped through legacy media, through social media, through modern communication, that becomes almost meaningless in that we're outraged about just about everything. And it's exhausting and it is unproductive at times. So, kind of an all of the above approach to what you said. I loved everything that you said, and trying to be the best version of ourselves that we can be, working internally for a little while. I'll offer these thoughts. Even though a lot of things have been said about day one, January 20th, 2025, X, Y, and Z is going to happen, that's really not how it works in America. That some proclamations may come down, some executive orders may happen, new people will take office, but then this is all going to take a while to kind of work through a system, and there'll be things that happen and things that don't happen that look like they're going to. And I think we need a little time to kind of reflect on what's actually taking place and how we feel about it, and to find a way to learn about it without being told how to feel about it, that this is the best thing that's ever happened to our nation or the worst thing that's ever happened. I think being prepared for us to move forward in whatever ways we see fit as individuals is really important. And finding that local or state opportunity to then address some of the things that we may not feel are being done well at the national level might be the best avenue for a while. I like your all of the above. I know that personally, I've been trying to work on myself a little bit, find those hobbies, find those areas of solace that help me reflect and grow and evolve. But then also finding an avenue back into the things that I care about and where I might find an inflection point in my life, in my region, in my state, and then in my nation.
I've been trying to remember in my own mind the things that provide consolation in troubled times. And of course, nothing is better, in my opinion, than Reinhold Niebuhr's famous Serenity prayer. You know how it goes. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Again, perfect consolation, perfect advice about how to move forward at this time. And let me just give you a couple more things that really, I've been on the road for a very long time, but I stopped at the Harry S. Truman Presidential Library. He's a hero of mine. I've read a couple of recent books about him and I deeply admire him. And in the library, there's a little tiny origami crane. I mean, it's smaller than a postage stamp. And I went up and read the interpretation. So a Japanese girl named Sadako Sasaki was radiated at Hiroshima. She survived. And then she made it a goal to make 1,000 cranes using origami, which is an amazing Japanese paper art. It wound up not quite happening. She died in the year of my birth, 1955, on October 25th. She had made 644 of these small cranes. So her classmates, David, made the other 356 to piece out the full 1,000. There's a statue of Sadako Sasaki at the Hiroshima Peace Park. I'll post it on our site, LT America. And every day on Remembrance Day, people from all over the world, but particularly from Japan, bring origami and other images of cranes to put there in honor of the resilience of the human spirit. Now, we're not in the Holocaust here. Don't get me wrong. We're not in Hiroshima or Nagasaki. But I really recommend that people take up a craft, that people find something that they can do, maybe that you have always wanted to do, or something that you did dabble in before but never made it a discipline. I just made a tiny little list, and you can add to it, David. Woodwork. I'd love to be able to make cabinets and so on. Play the ukulele or the guitar, work in stained glass, find a way of baking like the world's greatest sourdough loaf, take up the piano or the violin, keep a daily diary. I mean, and you probably have other suggestions, but if something with your hands, not your mind necessarily, but your hands, and learn a craft or an art that would satisfy you and will take a lot of discipline and show you that however old you are, whether you're 85 or 8, you're still capable of incredible growth.
It is so funny that those are the first few items on your list, because for the last few years, I've been trying to teach myself to play guitar. I've been trying to take up some woodworking and wood carving. I've dabbled a little bit in stained glass. So I couldn't agree more that having that opportunity to conceptualize something, work on it, execute, evaluate, and maybe do it again gives you the opportunity to feel success and to basically live life and to do the things that can bring you joy. And with that thought, we'll take a quick break and then come back for more of this discussion on Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. Welcome back to Listening to America with Clay Jenkinson. We're having a fascinating discussion here as we transition from 2024 to 2025, looking at the new year, all the opportunities and challenges that may be there, and how we deal with all of that. And Clay, you just gave us an amazing example of the cranes that came out of Hiroshima and some of the issues there. I think you have another example you might be able to share with us.
I do. By the way, I looked up origami, and I wanted to see if you could get origami kits for dinosaurs, and you can. I mean, apparently there's one for everything. So I'm thinking of maybe a triceratops, something gross. I don't think I can do a tiny postage stamp size crane, but I don't have the fingers for that. But another one of my heroes, kind of a hero anti-hero, is Albert Speer, who was the architect in Hitler's Germany. Hitler had kind of an unrequited crush on Speer because Speer was a true artist and Hitler had aspired to be one. And Speer was going to design the world of the 1,000-year Reich. And of course, we know what happened. He went to prison. He was one of the people tried in Nuremberg. He was in prison for 20 years in Spandau. He wrote 2 great books about it. The second one, the one I'm talking about today, is called The Spandau Diaries, and I heartily recommend them, David. It's an amazing book because he's trying to wrestle with his complicity. He's not trying to pretend that he wasn't part of this. He says, I should have known. I sort of did. I sort of knew what was going on in the camps, but I chose not to look at it. And he was also using slave labor from captured peoples to keep the armaments industries of Germany going. So he paid the price, and he was the only one of the Nazi insiders who accepted responsibility at Nuremberg. But he still got 20 years. And when he was in Spandau, it's amazing. In his 5th year, he realized he's going to die of boredom. So he talked the prison into letting him handle the garden, the vegetable garden. And he spent every part of every day out in the vegetable garden, and he turned it into a splendid prison garden. Again, using your hands. But then in his 8th year, I just love this. He decided that he needed to stay fit. And so he decided to walk every day. Good plan. But the walkway where he could walk within the walls was quite small. But he decided to keep records. And he decided to walk around the world. And so every day he would note down the number of kilometers or steps that he walked. His first goal was to walk to Heidelberg, which was 626 kilometers away. This is virtual walking, of course. But then he would get from the prison library books on Heidelberg, the history of Heidelberg, tourist books on Heidelberg. And then he went on, and he went from Heidelberg to Istanbul, and then Afghanistan, and then India, China, Russia, all the way to the Bering Strait. He crossed the Bering Strait, virtually, of course. He went down the west coast of America, and by the time he had finished, after 12 years, he had gone 31,936 kilometers and noted down the distances every day. That's 19,844 miles. And but so far it's all great, because imagine how this allowed him to have purpose and to organize his mind and to find and to keep learning, to read all these books about Asia, Istanbul, Russia, etc. Must have been a good prison library. In the last week of this, he sent a postcard to a friend and said, pick me up 30 kilometers west of Guadalajara in Mexico. So he had walked around the world to Guadalajara within this tiny perimeter of the prison camp, kept the records, and then he had the grace and humor to tell a friend, if you want to pick me up, I'll be 30 km west of Guadalajara. I'm going to try something along these lines because I think it would be so cool to walk around the world and to read books about Trieste and books about Damascus, although maybe not this week, books about Johannesburg, books about Cairo, as you get to those places. So there's another one.
I think it's a beautiful thing when you can find purpose in life. That's the key. That's the whole message, is find something that can give your day meaning, and that at the end of the day, you can feel like you've been fulfilled and also anticipate the next dawn. I'll offer this up as a thought too. In addition to those things, which that is an absolutely wonderful suggestion. And of course, now we all have the ability to broadcast ourselves, whether it be on social media, YouTube, Facebook, whatever, but you can share your journey with your neighbors and do that. The other thing you can do is actually look around your own neighborhood and say, how can I make a difference here? How can I find purpose in the 16 square blocks where I might live, or in the 10 square miles that makes up my hometown, or in my region? Personally, I found myself in the arena the last few years. I serve as mayor of the city of Radford, and you do get bloodied and you do get beaten and you do have sleepless nights, but you also can find a way to make a difference in the lives of those that are closest to you, that live
And
around you.
conspiracies. I mean, you were the subject of conspiracies.
All kinds of things. But it's also a chance when one person says, you really helped me, or you made a difference here, and I noted that. And every once in a while, I'll have just a random message from someone that appreciates something that I either championed or helped fulfill or helped support. And that is what I would offer to our listeners that are out there today. There are tons of opportunities, whether you want to be part of a board or commission in your locality, where you maybe make a difference with the Department of Recreation or the parks, or you want to plant trees with your forestry commission, or you want to address issues that are facing your community economically with your industrial authority or economic development authority. Those are opportunities that you can participate in, and many of those are not elected positions. They're things you can be appointed to, or that you can volunteer to, or at the very least, attend the meetings and participate. And if you can find purpose there and find pathways to success where you can make a small difference and move that needle just a little bit, it is more of that light in the darkness, and it gives you a chance to journey just as Spear did throughout his travel around the world.
Yeah, that's great. And I admire you for your willingness to be in the arena. I know you got your fingertips burned a few times, but it's essential. And of course, we live in this time where there's such a great deal of rage that's been unleashed that people feel they have the right to threaten. I just want to go back to the idea of, escape. If you're going to escape, maybe not NCIS, maybe not Three's Company, maybe not Gilligan's Island, maybe not Bonanza, maybe not Gunsmoke, maybe not Real Housewives. How about read the complete works of somebody? So I made a list, and I actually, there's a website for everything in the world, as you know. Some of the top are Charles Dickens, Wallace Stegner, Hermann Hesse, Leo Tolstoy, that'll take a while, Dostoevsky, Jane Austen, that won't take too long, just 6 novels, Mark Twain, Herman Melville, Virginia Woolf, Shakespeare. So, if you're going to binge, it might be worth binging for something that will deepen and lift you rather than just entertain you and take your mind off of it. I have a friend who reads the Pulitzer Prize-winning novels year by year. I was born in 1955. I looked it up this morning. It was William Faulkner who won the Pulitzer Prize for Literature for his book A Fable. Or you could watch movies, and not just like movies, but watch films. John Ford films, you could watch all of them. My favorite director is the Italian Michelangelo Antonioni. He did Blow Up, which is a famous 60s film. Fellini, the greatest of the Italian directors. Martin Scorsese, Alfred Hitchcock, Steven Spielberg, the Coen brothers. But, having something with it's like Albert Speer walking around the world. Instead of just reading a book here and a book there, picking them up off the library shelves, if you made a purposeful read, this gives you a sense of elevation that you wouldn't have just by reading. Same is true of music. And I'll tell you, the weirdest thing has happened to me. I've kind of fallen in love with the Grateful Dead. And I never thought I'd fall in love with the Grateful Dead, but man, have I. I will say it's groovy. I never thought that as a senior citizen I would suddenly glom on to the Grateful Dead, but I have, and I'm enthralled. And so there are ways in which we can get through this that are deeply purposeful and satisfying. And I think that's so much better, and I'm sure you agree, than wringing our hands and raging and saying the world is coming to an end.
I love all of those thoughts because you're right. And I think finding new things is one of the greatest journeys in life. We are so busy and we're in our own little echo chambers and we don't really have that chance to explore. But, to put in a plug for public radio a lot of times will introduce you to these things, whether it be a symphony or an author or a performer that you never knew existed. And listening to the station, you might find something you never knew before. I made a little list when you and I were talking about this as we prepared. My list is not as learned as yours, but I'll share some of my thoughts. I love Capricorn. Frank Capra is one of my favorite directors of all time. And as corny as he might be, going back and looking at Mr. Smith Goes to Washington or watching It's a Wonderful Life when I'm feeling low, kind of gives you that hope for humanity that things might not be as bad as they feel or they seem. I'm going to give you another movie that a lot of people don't think of in terms of deep thought because it's a comedy and one that could be life transforming, but Groundhog Day with Bill Murray. That movie is actually far more faith-based than people realize. And it is about self and personal improvement when you have no other option. I love that he rages, he indulges, he gives in to every possible vice that he can during the first portion when he thinks he has all this eternity and invulnerability and everything else. And then he gets frustrated and wants to just be out of it and die and not exist. And then he starts to go into the serenity prayer and basically say, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the courage to change the things I can. And he begins to change and become a better person and find new passion and new purpose and a new goal in life. And he is a transformed individual at the end of the movie. So, I think there are things even in popular culture. Back to the Future, another one of my favorite movies and movie series. And I grew up with that. I graduated from high school the same year as Marty McFly. And my mom graduated from high school in 1955.
Whoa.
There were a lot of things that rang bells. But that entire movie trilogy, I think, gives desperation and hope at the same time and kind of shows different pathways. I'll share a way I escape every single year.
Okay.
One of my favorite books, I'm a big Ian Fleming fan. I love James Bond, love the James Bond books, but I go back specifically to On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And Bond is held prisoner in Peace Gloria and has to escape. And there's a long section where he viscerally talks about preparing for the escape and the things he's going to do and how he does it. In a way, it takes me there. I have an audiobook of that I'll listen to. It takes me to that moment, and I kind of live viscerally through him to be able to escape from the things that are imprisoning me personally, mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it happens to be. Find that thing in your life that allows you to live that moment vicariously through someone else so that you're able to escape. And it gives you the hope of the future.
All right, first of all, one reason to watch Groundhog Day is Ally McDowell, one of the most beautiful actresses, in a quirky kind of wonderful way, but one of the most beautiful actors in American life. And I always love Bill Murray. When I really need to be cheered up, I think I can take it into the trash more than you. I watch Naked Gun 2.5, Dumb and Dumber, Blazing Saddles. If I really, really need to cheer up, I watch Naked Gun, and I take the bait every time. Ian Fleming, now I know why you wear an ascot, and you're always with a leggy blonde somewhere.
I know you've been thinking through this a great deal, Clay. What is your formula for how to make all this
Here's
happen?
What I'm doing, and I don't pretend that anyone else will want to do this, but I traveled the country in this Airstream. It was 23 feet by 10, so less than 150 square feet of usable space. So that's tiny. That's a tiny home. I was in it for 210 days, so the majority of the year. And you learn minimalism. You have one cup, you have one spatula, you have one pan, you have one set of sheets. You can't take all the books you want. You have to live a more modest and minimalist life. And it really, I'm a Thoreauvian. Thoreau's Walden is my favorite American book. I think it's the most important American book in many respects. And he talks about what it is to live simply and minimally, and how much that not only declutters your life and reduces the cost of your life, but it also opens your soul, because we're burdened with the things that we carry, that we accumulate, that are sitting around in our house and so on. My house is a maximalist house here in North Dakota, not a minimalist house. And so I've decided for this calendar year, I'm going to get rid of 5 things per day. 5 things. I go through the house and say, do I really need this? And I'm not just tossing them. I'm finding homes for them. And so books are going that I know I'll never come back to, clothes that I will never wear again, items that are just sitting there. And I'm not just going to go to Amazon.com and then fill those vacuums. I'm trying to bring it down. That's one thing. I'm trying to write an intentional letter per day. Now, that may or may not involve a stamp. Better if it does, but it can be an email. But instead of just responding, let's say you write me a letter saying we should do this program on such and such a thing, and here's what's going on at Radford. Instead of just going, yeah, I hear you, and let's do this and that, sit down and write an intentional letter to someone you respect or care about, and put yourself into it. It's not just reactive, but write a letter, and especially to tell people why you value them, why you appreciate them. I'm going to try to do one a day, 365 of them. I'm collecting them so that I can look at this and say, this, see what the responses are. As I said, no CNN, no MSNBC, no Fox, unless there is an earthquake that, takes San Francisco into the sea, or, a meteor strikes New York. I am not going to take the bait. I am not going to turn on cable news, because that just sucks you right into the crisis and will kill you. It'll kill your soul. I believe I'll be a better human being on January 1st, 2026 than I am now if I follow this path. That's my coping mechanism. I know we're almost out of time. I'm sure you're thinking about such things too.
I'll offer this thought that it doesn't have to be all or nothing. You could still have your goal of 5 things a day, but if you only end up with one thing on one day, that's okay. It's still the act of moving forward. If you write a letter once a day, fantastic. But if you only do 1 or 2 a week, that's pretty good. That's better. I think the biggest problem with resolutions is they're kind of an all or nothing proposition. That if we say we're going to walk 10 miles a day and we only walk 9 miles, well, we've ruined it and we can't keep going. So having that spectrum of change and opportunity there, and having a goal that even if you only meet 60% or 40% or 80% of that goal, that you'll be in a better place and be that better version of yourself. I'll be that better version of myself. I am looking to try to go to the gym every single day, at least for a minute. Even if I go in and lift weights on one machine and walk 15 steps, I've gone to the gym, and have that low bar for having met the goal for the day. But also the high bar goals are good too, to kind of get us further along. I'm looking forward to the book club. I'm looking forward to the continued discussion. I've said it before that this program is an opportunity to cope, an opportunity to prepare, an opportunity to address things, and really listening to America, listening to each other and working together, we can find a brighter tomorrow and we can find a pathway together. So I'm excited to continue on this journey throughout 2025 with you as we move toward our 250th birthday in 2026.
David Horton, I so appreciate you. I think this is one of the most important programs that we have done, and I don't just mean when you're hosting, but at Listening to America. I hope everyone will share it if they find it useful. I know we're out of time. I just want to conclude by quoting from Candide. So Voltaire wrote Candide in the 18th century in France, and everything goes wrong that can possibly go wrong for Candide and his people. And at the end, this is what happens. He says, Mr. Pangloss, this naive Pollyanna philosopher, says, There is a concatenation of events in this, the best of all possible worlds, for if you had not been kicked out of a magnificent castle for love of Miss Cunegonde, if you had not been put into the Inquisition, if you had not walked all over America, if you had not stabbed the Baron, if you had not lost all your sheep from the fine country of El Dorado, you would not be here eating preserved citrons and pistachio nuts. And to which Candide, having suffered all this, says, like Job, he says, all this is very well, but let us cultivate our garden. And I think this is the time when each of us should cultivate her or his garden. We'll see you all next week for another important edition of Listening to America.